Hey Orbital fans! I thought I'd do a bit of an update of where I am in the progression of breaking down and converting Orbital to something that's a little bit more digestible as a project that CMM is working on, and as promised, I offered to and promised to kind of break things down into ready-to-use project form. So there's no setup time required, and based on some basic project management stuff, should be able to be used as a quick start based on some rather basic features available in Unreal 4. Now in 3ds Max, as you can see, this is where I'm doing the breakdown. I've already taken Orbital's BSP and converted over to a scale correct version in 3ds Max, which can be then edited and broken down, and this being done and that being done. And I'll be using, since it's a conversion, I'll be using a technique which I like to call edit in place, meaning that world space origin in 3ds Max matches up with world coordinates within Unreal 4, so whatever I do create here pops over there. In the future, of course, I'll do a quick overview of the level streaming approach of creating what in 3ds Max is referred to as an X reference file. They even have, I think it's under file here, a referencing system built in as to different objects that can be added to the scene as separate elements built based on creating blocks of data, which then can be accessed as separate individual files and then consolidated in a single environment where you can't edit items, but you can continue to place items and create new referencing levels. So at the moment, I have the environment broken down into, as you can see over here, as to blocks. Each block contains elements that make up that block. You know, it will be something as complex as a complete piece of machinery, or a couple of surfaces that make up the whole. So I kind of show you hide selection. I kind of show you, if you select, for example, that piece here is over here by name as a element that makes up block 1. Yeah, block 1. So I can turn it on and off, where this here is a model that will be placed within this area, which is the cargo ship, so that can be turned off and on as well at the same time. Here's another element placed under new object, which I have yet to find out where it needs to go. Map objects. So this layer will contain objects that are in support of the level, like a box, a crate, a barrel, a satellite, etc., etc., which then can be replaced as a map object and not as part of the in-place edit. So by being able to turn it off and on, particularly as a level stream, we can get it out of the way without having to take that into consideration as part of the block itself. So let's see, can we just kind of hide this as a selection? You can see we have a box down here. You probably recognize this within this area. Let's see. So if we go ahead and turn off map objects, boom, they kind of disappear. So same as the pipes and what have you. Once it's moved over to the project file, then each of these boxes will be accessible as a single item. So you'll take the entire map, the map object layer, place it into the environment, and then as you work along, you can just go ahead and replace this item with the proper map object, which can be then updated ongoing. As I mentioned, once we got this all squared away, then I'll be covering a little bit more on how other items necessary for this environment is created. Basically, this is level, you could call this level 1, as being able to have some form of reference to the original, meaning that anything that's in this environment, I'll be taking these out one at a time and creating a reference block that will be loaded into Unreal 4 and then saved as a streaming level, so anyone working on any separate level could just have access to that level and not have to worry about contending with the rest of the stuff. But we're talking more about what will be contained in the package, and the next step from this point is to create the necessary collision mesh geometry, and I'll probably do a follow-up on that, on how I'm going to be building that, as all it does really is contains the player within the environment. So the reference level could be used as to building and ongoing, and can be destructive, meaning you can say, okay, I totally replaced this environment, so this as a reference is no longer needed, because the actual build of this block, block 3, as you can see, turn it off and on, is completed as to design, so we can get rid of block 3 or substitute it. There's a couple of different options that we can do here, but that's just to kind of explain it. So the next step from here is to create the necessary collision mesh, so that we can drop all this stuff, export each of these blocks out one at a time. See, for example, we can just we can select just what items that are in there, or we can turn each of these levels off completely. Sometimes it's hard to actually select them. Turn them all off. Select block 1. This is all of block 1. That has to be moved to, obviously, moved to a different block. You can see there's still some cleanup and editing to do. But I can just take all of that, go over to export. Come on. I need a new mouse. Export selected to FBX, and I'll call that block 1, which shows up in master directory. Another option that we have is if we place this underneath the project development folder. Every time it's updated, it updates the map object too as well. Some discussion in that area of how to manage that, blah blah blah. But in theory, as presented, everything will be kind of set up to create any kind of option that you wish, as well as having access to the FBX source. So whatever's being worked on can be worked on in 3ds Max. It can be worked on in Maya. It can be worked on, of course, in Blender, or whatever option that you want, as long as your application of choice supports FBX, of course. That should be enough to sort of get things going. So at this stage, I still got some cleanup to do, as you saw, making sure that parts are in within the correct blocks to start with, and then create the collision box environment for this setup here. How to describe that? I do collision different than most, and I'll do a kind of a how-to once I get to that point. But keep these intros as to work in progress short, and not turn into a 2-hour lecture. We'll call this one complete as far as progression on this particular map conversion.